I'm going to call to order the special meeting of the Chino Valley Planning and Zoning Commission of August 9th, 2022. And per instructions from Vice Chair Pasiak, I am going to lead the pledge tonight. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so I believe we have pretty much a full commission. Would you like to call a roll call for us just to make it official?
Commissioner Welker.
Here.
Commissioner Penn.
Here.
Commissioner Metters.
Here.
Commissioner Switzer.
Here.
Commissioner Somerville.
Here.
Vice Chair Pasak.
Here.
Chair Merritt.
Here. Okay, so we're going to move to item C, which is the consent calendar, which I'm going to read tonight only because there is a continuance in it, and I want to make sure it's clear. Okay, so the consent calendar, all items listed under the consent calendar will be approved by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless the commission or a member of the audience wishes to speak about an item, in which case the chair will pull the item from the consent calendar to be heard. The consent calendar today consists of approval of minutes of July 5th, 2022 regular meeting, withdrawals by applicant, none, time extensions, none, a continuance, we have one continuance. It's a C.4.1 CUP-2022-01. This is a request by Derek and Louise Perita for a conditional use permit for the Equine Rescue Center on a 5-acre parcel zoned SR 2.5 located at 680 South Fire Sky Lane, Chino Valley, Arizona. The next item is for approval. Any corrections to be removed from the consent calendar? And now we will vote. I would entertain a motion.
I move the consent agenda be approved.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, that's done. Thank you. Okay, item D, public hearings. We have none. We have item E, which is an action item. There are two action items in this list. We have action item E1, mini training, planning commission discussion, motions, and what makes it to council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought it would be important to have a brief discussion about what it is that you guys talk about that actually makes its way to council. We make sure that there is a good description of things in the minutes, but just because you talk about them and just because they're in the minutes doesn't mean it makes it to council. The minutes make it to council and they can read what you guys all talked about. But if it's not in the actual motion, then the motion is what tells us as staff what we need to change in the document that the council gets. So
we need to be more specific with our motions sometimes.
correct. So we have to be really specific. So if, for example, y'all thought that this photo studio needed to be pink, and you talked about colors, but in the motion, you didn't say the studio has to be pink. The studio will not be recommended to be pink to council. It'll be in the discussion and they'll hear all of the things that you guys had to say. But that isn't a piece that the council is going to say, oh, the commission says it needs to be pink. So if what we give you, you're making recommendations for additions or deletions, that has to be in the motion that you make.
So
And
it
it's
sounds
okay
to
to
me
have-
like we, as careful as we try to be, need to be even more diligent with our motions and discussion about them
Correct.
and the outcome of the discussion.
Correct. Because the vote actually is all of you either agreeing or disagreeing on every piece of that change to the motion.
Okay, so we'll try to be more minutely specific.
Awesome.
And specifically, I saw that come to fruition
Yes, you
on
did.
item E2 because I was at that council meeting and I spoke up because I was at our meeting and we discussed all that, but we didn't put it in the motion. So
We didn't put all of it in the motion, for
Glad I
sure.
was there that night.
Right. And I wasn't going to say anything at that meeting because that was not an appropriate platform. So I just
Does
thought it
that
would be
mean we
good
need to
for,
be, does that mean we need to be more specific if we oppose something in a motion? Or not?
Absolutely.
well,
Or agree with something.
Or
either
if
way.
you
we-
want
We give a
something-
general reason why.
so you can agree or disagree, but do you want something added to the motion that's being made?
I think the motion is the critical statement
Yes.
there.
Yes.
We appreciate you putting off our butt chewing until privacy with,
I'm not going to do that. It's just, it occurred to me that probably no one had ever spent any time talking about it with you guys. And how would you know unless someone
well, that's
spent that time?
actually really true. So just so the commission is all in agreement, we all understand that every time we make a motion, every word has to be well thought out, and maybe we just go over it more than one time just to make sure we have our wordage correct, including writing it down before we make the motion.
But we make those motions from what's written on the paper. so-
But we also
We're-
do change them
We're
depending on our
allowed to
discussion.
change them any way we
Okay.
want.
All
You
right.
bet.
And also on our motion for this E2 was actually accurate, but it was worded kind of, it made all sense to us. But since it had some ambiguity in the wording, it was a little vague. So just needed to be a little more concise.
Which we're going to hammer out tonight, but
Yes.
that's a good lesson for all of us, I think. Is there any questions from the council or not the council, but the commission on this? All right. Are we good?
We are good.
All right, so we're going to move forward to item E2, which is TA-2022-07, the guest house text amendment. Town council has requested clarification by the planning commission of specific items related to the proposed text amendment forwarded to council and heard at their July 12th meeting. The text amendment addresses changes to section 2.1 of the UDO, revising the definition of guest house and replacement of existing section 4.1 in the UDO with general regulations for guest house development. The items to be clarified include, and there are 5 items. Should I read through those just to get them out?
Sure.
Okay, so first one is definition of what is meant by new manufactured home. Clarification of when stick-built and manufactured homes are allowed. Manufactured homes on a permanent foundation. And then separate meters for utilities, meaning water, sewer, gas, electricity cable for guest houses. And then finally CCNRs and town code conflicts, who actually wins out on that deal. So we're looking for a staff presentation, I think.
All right. You just gave half of it. So
I'm
at
just
the-
happy to help out.
I love it. So at the council meeting, we did have a member of the public get up and ask what does new mean? And gave a couple of examples. Well, what if it was last year's model? What if it was a manufactured home that hadn't been lived in? Is that new, even though it might not be the same model year as the year you're in? And I know we had, as a commission, a lot of discussion about what that should be. And so this is a good opportunity for the group to define what that word new is. And if you're okay with the prior year, or the prior year of a manufactured home that hadn't been lived in, or whatever that is, I offered a definition in your staff report. New is defined as a unit that has not been lived in or used and is the same model year as the year in which the unit is proposed to be installed. That seemed pretty cut and dry to me, but there's always weird exceptions. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity for you guys to have some dialogue.
So, Commissioner Somerville, why don't you start us off, and we'll just go right down this line this way, and everybody can have a say-so on what they think new means, and then we'll fight over it.
Bring your mic down just a little bit.
Okay, quite frankly, I'm still struggling with stick built. So, I'd like to know, I like something a little bit, I mean, I have a general idea what it means, but I'd like something a little more specific on stick built, but I'll
So we'll tackle that in a minute.
Yeah,
but
let
Let's
me-
just stick with this particular item and I'll be thoroughly
Sure.
explanatory for you on stick build.
yes. As far as the new is concerned.
Yeah, we need to have you speak into the.
Oh, I'm
microphone.
sorry. Are we dealing with the date? Are we giving a particular date for new? I know you have here, new is defined as a unit that has not been lived in. You mean it's just been manufactured and hasn't been, nobody's moved into it yet?
Correct.
Okay. All right, that's what I was concerned about. And yeah, I'm sorry, that's about all I had to say about new, yeah. Manufactured.
Yeah, same thing. I would like it to be new, not lived in prior, brand new. And then as far as the year, that gets a little touchy because like cars, they come out like 2023s are coming out now, vehicles. That's not even 2023 yet. So not a calendar year, but it needs to be manufactured within a year and a half of the placement or something like that. I really wouldn't know how to specifically say that, but current model year, I don't know how you would want to word that, but just so they know that it needs to be, obviously not 2 years old.
Yeah, something has not been
Less,
lived in.
I guess you could say that, less than 2 years old. New,
Current or prior
because
model
sometimes they
year.
have year-old models that are
Yes.
still brand new that they haven't sold.
Right.
But they're the previous year models, so
But the key is not lived in, right?
yeah, that might even just solve it right there.
Okay.
That it's never been,
Set anywhere, maybe?
yeah, maybe remember not previously sold, or that's hard too because it could be new used.
Same with not lived in. I know for guest homes are going to be usually a smaller unit. A lot of times they'll have those on the sales lot as a demo. They're not lived in, but they sometimes will hold them from 1 year until the next year's new model comes out. So even though they haven't been lived in, they might not be that current year. Like you said, an older model car, it might be, it's like this is 22, they might still have a 19 on the lot waiting for the 23s to come in before they move it off. So it's still new. It hasn't been lived in. It's just that saying that it's an exact year, I think is too specific, as long as it's new and hasn't been lived in. Because they have rules about how many times you can actually move a manufactured home, set it up, tear it down and move it someplace else. So that's going to restrict a lot of what can come in. But if we say new, not lived in, that's going to limit it.
I'm sorry, just to add one more thing, because it's kind of on the same subject roughly, but that it needs to be manufactured home, not a mobile home.
Yes.
Yeah, which that's pretty clear right there.
Now, can I just ask, I'm sorry to keep asking questions, but now what if it's been used as an office, for instance, instead of, hasn't been lived in, but it's been used as an office? Or do we need to go back and define what's been lived in as far as lived in is concerned?
That's
know
a
what I
good
mean?
question. Yeah,
Well, if it's been used as an office, it's
I
going to
would-
been
I would consider
set
that
up and
used.
then moved
Yeah.
again,
I would
other
consider
than
that
the
used.
demo at a lot.
But it's not really been lived
Mm.
in as far as, I mean,
But it's not a lot sale.
yeah.
It's been somewhere else.
It's been sold.
Does
Been used.
occupied help?
I don't even think-
Commissioner Pasiak, or Vice Chair, I should say.
Occupied as a house? I don't know.
I have no problem with the definition as presented. You can debate the point of used. It's, doesn't matter if it's been lived in, doesn't matter if it's been an office, it's been used. So I don't have a problem by just saying not been lived in or used.
What's your comment?
I think I'm good as long as the wording is never lived in or been occupied, that it is brand new. Would that also include a model home that's been used just for
I
display,
don't see it in here.
with people going in and out of it all the time, but it's never been transferred to anyone? I don't know if that needs to be included. And if it was used for business, it's used. I mean,
Bill, what do you think?
Not lived in, used or used, yeah, it's perfectly fine.
Okay, so let me throw something out there just for more discussion. It could say new, not used or occupied. And the installation date is no more than 2 years from the date of manufacture. That gives them plenty of time to get rid of it. If it's been used for a model home, because I worked for a gentleman that had a model home, the toilet gets used and people walk around and open and shut the doors, so it's not new when they're done with it. To me, that is what new sounds like. That pretty well covers a lot of it. I mean, if we're gonna get right down to picking things.
I just have a question. I don't see that definition in the proposed code language.
It was in your motion.
What you're seeing is in the staff report is what I'm proposing.
Okay.
And so I will be.
Add it. Okay.
So whatever you guys talk about tonight, those will be a separate thing that goes to council for the changes to the ordinance.
It was in
So,
Almost everything.
I mean, I don't see why we can't come up with a definition tonight to send to council that they could certainly change as however they felt like.
That's the goal.
Okay. So is there any issue with saying new, not used or occupied, and the installation date no more than 2 years from the date of manufacture?
I agree.
Does that legally cover us to the best that you could say tonight?
I think that sounds pretty good. And know that I will go back and listen to this meeting tomorrow and verbatim get every single thing down that you guys have said.
So you're going to take that whole package to the town council? Okay, all right. So
Okay,
we're going to move forward from that particular item unless somebody else wants to take another poke at it or come up with more definition. Okay. So clarification of when stick-built and manufactured guest homes are allowed. So just to help out with the definition of stick-built in construction terminology means that it's nailed together on site from separate pieces of lumber, which in the business are called stick. And so that's what stick-built or site-built means, is that it's built on site. It's not built somewhere else and moved to that particular spot.
And it could be steel.
Pardon?
Could use steel.
Could use steel, but it
And
doesn't say wood. It
Or
just
brick.
says stick-built and built on site.
Yep.
Yep.
Site-built. So that terminology, did that make that pretty clear for you or anybody else up here that had a question? on
I
it?
just wanted to make sure it was, it was clearly defined.
And instead of stick-built, maybe we could say
Site.
site-built, which would cover the metal and wood and anything else
Mhm.
you really could get away with making it out of according to the building codes.
that's perfect.
Okay, so we'll change that to site-built. Okay, so again, we'll start there and go this way and just get what everybody thinks ought to have happen. Commissioner Somerville?
Are we still on the stick-built site? site-built thing?
Yeah, and which.
what the
which
thing is to
scenario you'd like
clarify,
see happen.
Oh, I see what
to
you're saying.
clarify what situations would require a site-built home and what or a site-built building and which ones
With a,
would be
with a guest
manufactured.
house attached, right?
Yeah,
Or
a
on the
guest
property.
house,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I was looking at manufactured home. And as a primary residence. And where it says stick built, it says, so you would, what I'm trying to understand is if somebody had a manufactured home as their primary residence, then in that case, you would allow a stick-built house, which is more substantial than a manufactured home?
In scenario 2 and 3, yes, you would,
Yeah,
but not in one.
but not in one. Yeah, I see that. Okay. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Commissioner Switzer?
Yeah, I would like to see scenario 2. So in other words, if it's stick built, it requires stick built. If primary is manufactured, you could go with manufactured or site built. But no manufactured with primary of site built,
Okay,
to be clear.
scenario 2, okay, got it.
And I'm for
Commissioner Meadows?
scenario 3, because if it's a site-built home and you're still bringing in a brand new manufactured home, they're both new, they're both nice looking. So I'm with 3.
Vice Chair?
I would go with scenario 3. Because I don't think we should just restrict stick built to just having stick built properties. And as a matter of fact, my next door neighbor has a manufactured house and a stick built house on the lot. So
I guess I should state the reasoning that I feel that way. So if your primary is a site-built home and it's brick or stucco, you're not going to find a manufactured home that is built with stucco or brick. And they should look the same. That's the whole idea, is to keep the neighborhood cohesive and not look like we got a million different style, architectural designs going on in one neighborhood. If we're going to allow these guest homes, I think they should look as close to identical as the primary house as possible. Stucco to stucco, brick to brick, lap siding to lap siding, whatever it is, shingle, it should match. So it looks like it was made, not necessarily made at the same time, but close to it. And paint should also be similar, same paint.
They do.
Otherwise, it's really gonna could make a nice neighborhood look really bad.
They do make siding on manufactured homes that look like stucco.
If there's something can be, comparable, and architectural design, roof pitch, there's so many things involved.
That's the hard part. is
The
roof
type of
pitch.
roof, you got a tile roof on the primary house. Are you gonna put a tile roof on a manufactured home? Probably not gonna happen. So that's where I really feel this is important.
Gary, you're good then?
I
You picked scenario 3. if I'm not
I still stay with scenario 3.
All right. How would you pick?
I think I would go along with scenario 3 and using the wording site built.
Commissioner Wilker?
Same thing, scenario 3 with site built is the terminology.
All right, so
I would like to make one comment that if you look into the UDO that has been attached on page 3 of the UDO, which is section 4.1, which is guest houses, item F in section 4 says all guest house must be architecturally compatible with the primary residence principal residence on site.
item 7 right there. Oh, one more, okay.
And that would be difficult to accomplish with a manufactured home placed on a lot with a site-built home.
Right.
Very difficult to accomplish in many cases.
So
That's all the issue.
my pick is scenario 2. I don't think that we should allow manufactured homes on any site-built properties if it's already there. And Commissioner Vice Chair Pasiak brings up a good point. The guest house must be architecturally compatible with the principal residence on site. While you do have siding that looks like stucco, it doesn't look that much like stucco. And if you got a tile roof, you're not going to put a real tile roof on top of a manufactured home. You may have some sort of lightweight substitute, which will generally kind of look like a tile roof, but not if you looked at it very long. So I'm going to push for scenario 2 because it gives lots of flexibility. I don't believe that we should be mixing site-built homes with manufactured guest housing. I live in a manufactured home, so I'm not being prejudiced, but I just don't think that it would be going in the right direction, so as to speak. So how do we fight that out?
I don't know, but I would strongly oppose scenario 3. I mean, that just would open up a whole lot of can of worms. I mean, plus a manufactured home, as they are sold, are a rectangle box. You can get them with porches and whatnot, but you don't have to. Again, is that statement enough to say that it has to architecturally be close to the site-built home, with no porches or?
I know in the building business, when we build shops and RV garages that are in subdivisions that have CCNRs or some sort of rules like that, the building has to have a strong resemblance to the primary residence.
Yeah.
RV garage, we just built this last year, has a tile roof, it's stuccoed. I mean, it looks similar to the house in every manner that it could, except for it's 16 feet tall instead of 8 feet tall. But I just totally agree that we should keep it compatible architecturally and in the structural sense of how it's built. Manufactured homes are not site-built homes. They are not up to the quality or the building code standards, no matter what anybody says, because I worked on them all. They're just not. And not being prejudiced because I live in a manufactured home.
And I don't think it's a far stretch either to ask people to do that. I mean, if you have a site-built, stick-built home, it's probably what you're going to want anyways on your lot. So it matches. Manufactured homes aren't as cheap as they used to be either, so can't say that it is more expensive to do site built, but
Well, in that case, why don't we look at scenario 1? Just say if you have a site-built house, you have to put a site-built guest house on it. If you have a manufactured house, you have to have a manufactured guest house.
I'm not opposed to that either. I would prefer that actually, but I thought I was giving some leeway if you want to build, if you have a manufactured home as your primary and you want to put a site built, which I don't think would ever happen, but if you did want to.
Well, it goes
But you're
back-
right, same difference, flip flop. It's
It-
not
it-
going to match in the
Yeah,
neighborhood.
and it goes back to the compatibility issue you brought up.
Yeah, I agree.
So
Scenario one
Visually,
should be-
visually, the two just don't
Match.
mix.
They don't.
They don't mix together.
Hmm.
Okay, so Commissioner Somerville, would you be opposed to scenario 1? Which is stick-built to site-built to site-built and manufactured to manufactured.
That seems fine with me, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Switzer?
Scenario one's fine. Preferred.
Still agree.
Pardon, still 3? Okay. Vice Chair Pasiak?
I'll change mine to 1.
Okay. How do you vote, sir?
You won me over.
1? Okay. Commissioner, 1? Okay, well, I'm gonna vote 1 also, so. Okay, so can we all have a consensus that that is the recommendation that we're gonna send to town council, scenario one?
And this obviously doesn't affect existing situations. So this is going forward
Correct.
if you're going to
Yeah,
build something new. So
existing conditions would be grandfathered in,
Hmm.
which would be the case with all the other stuff that goes on with it. Okay, so manufactured homes on a permanent foundation, are they looking for what that means or?
So actually, that was in your motion.
yeah, I
So
don't think they
there's
read,
no
I
need
don't
to
think they read our
clarify.
motion. So
Pardon?
I don't think they read our motion that night. So it's in there that it needs to be on a permanent.
I mean, it's
and
pretty clear what that means. A permanent foundation means block or poured concrete.
And that was in the
We-
motion that you guys made.
I strongly think that that's the way to do it.
Yes,
Okay, so we're just gonna leave that wordage in there just as it is.
perfect.
Okay. Separate meters for utilities. What was the discussion in the meeting about that? Was there confusion or?
There was confusion about that. And the question was, what is sewer? What is water? And I'm like, I don't even know what you're asking me, but if it's about meters, currently the code says that you can't have separate meters for a guest house. And so that's what I used in the text amendment for the rental of guest houses. But it actually makes sense if we're going to be allowing them to be rented, that maybe the owner should have the option to do separate meters for water and sewer if they're hooked up to town water or a separate electric meter. So the
I
option
know-
is.
I
What-
know from my dad having rentals in Sun City, if they're paying the electric bill, they turn off the lights. And if somebody else is paying the electric bill, they aren't energy conscious. So I'm for separate meters.
So how about if we ask the town engineer, what's the town position on water meters and sewer meters, even though we don't have a bunch of sewer meters, but.
Mr. Chair, I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, I'll bet.
We actually have provisions for this in our utility code, at least for water. If I can just read you a little bit of it or paraphrase it. Section 51.076A concerns service connections. Every separate building supplied with town water and or sewer service must have its own separate connection with town mains, except two or more buildings located on the same lot or on contiguous lots under single ownership or apartments, trailer courts, or other similar developments. It also says upon written permission granted by the Public Works Director, supplied through a single meter connection with the town main as long as single ownership continues. So we will allow, what that means is we'll allow two primary and secondary residents on one meter if the owner wishes, as long as it's under single ownership. If they split the lot and it goes into separate ownerships, we need to separate the meters. So it pretty much the way it's written here, I have discretion to allow either way, depending on the owner's preference.
So mean that you would be able to tap into the yard line before it goes to the primary residence and branch off of that and put a meter on that line, or does it have to happen out at the street?
No, sir. Separate meters is separate taps on the main and two separate bills.
So if you had sewer, you'd have to dig the road up, make a second tap.
Two
Same thing
sewer
with the water
services
line.
is two separate taps and separate mains. They can, but for a guest house, they could just put a clean out and tap the same lateral service into the main and only pay one bill if they desired. It's pretty much their choice either way.
Okay. Was that pretty clear?
Yeah.
So it sounds to me like the
Sorry.
owner should have the option to have separate meters if they so desire. That's going to be expenses because APS will charge a separate charge and they may not hit the building twice
Right. I
or
can.
the property twice.
Right. I can only speak to water and sewer
Yep.
in this, and it pretty much falls under my authority. And I'm just telling you what I would do. A different public works director may have a different policy, but the way it's written, it's separate connections for separate buildings unless granted by the public works director.
So
And
the
then-
guest house is required to have a separate meter or
No.
not?
Right. That's how it's written. Except in the case of two or more buildings located on the same
Same
lot.
So if it's
So
on the
they're
same property, the guest house can operate off the same water line and water meter as the main house.
Right, but that needs it, and I hate it when they do this, but it actually gives me the authority to approve the piggyback type connection. So it,
Probably would depend on the layout of the property and the two buildings.
right, I couldn't tell you a reason why I would deny to a guest house on the same meter if the owner was requesting it personally.
Right. This seems like a huge expense if the person did not want to do that. To what purpose?
Yeah, when you add up $13,000 or so in connection fees between water and sewer, to do that twice is rather expensive. So if it's me, I'd put them on the same meter, and I think, don't quote me, but anecdotally, I think APS quit doing pony meters for power. And
Yeah, I
they
don't
only allow
believe-
one
I
meter.
think it would be difficult for APS to approve two meters on one property unless it was for a shop that had huge electrical requirements. They would, but they don't like doing that because
Right.
it's just extra. I know they do that, but they don't let you tie. It's a separate meter and a separate bill from my experience.
Mhm.
So maybe the wordage could be at the owner's discretion, separate meters for all utilities may be installed.
So the choice is require all the utilities to have separate meters, to not allow all the utilities to have separate meters, or to allow the property owner to have an option of which they choose.
I would say the property owner should have the option to choose separate meters if they wanted it. I don't think there should be a requirement because, as he says, what extenuating circumstance, because you built a guest house, would you have to spend $13,000 to bring a water line in when you have a perfectly good one there already?
Only if you choose to rent,
Pardon?
only if you choose to rent out your guest house,
Oh, I see. Okay. The
Right.
rent part makes the difference.
right?
Okay.
Sometimes for the owner. Would it, this is just a question, since this is written in the utility code, would it be proper to just refer utility connections to the utility code or?
Well, we have requirements in the current UDO.
Okay, so.
Anybody have any strong feelings about that one way or the other?
I would like to make a comment.
Yes, sir.
Part of the guest house letter that Will wrote up in July talks about recording an acknowledgement that will be reflected in the title search when the property changes hands. And this relates to the owner wanting to rent out the guest house. Well, if we allow separate meters for the primary residence and separate meters for the guest house, the owner does not need to sell the property. He just needs to go buy another property to live in. Then he'll have two rentals on one property with meters on all of them. So I don't think we should allow separate meters.
So let me ask a question because he brings up a point, but I also thought there was wordage in there that says the owner must live on that property.
That
It
is
does.
correct.
Yeah.
It says he must live on the
And-
property.
In the
And how,
primary.
how are we going to monitor that if he decides to not sell it, but just leave and live somewhere else?
Well,
And
his
then he changes his primary with no title search because it's still his property. And there's two rentals on it.
his tax bill will go to his new address.
Pardon?
His tax bill will go to his new address.
Yeah,
and it will not match the address of the guest house or the primary residence.
that's correct.
And we
So
don't
we're
have that
using-
many, so we can check them.
Yeah.
We can just annually just check them.
That there has to be some way of monitoring to make sure that he doesn't.
That should be
Make it into
put
the-
in some writing somewhere that gets done annually.
Yep. Well, we have a new software system so that we can plug it in and every year we'll just double check.
But does that need to be part of this deal? That requirement, because that's actually a good thing there.
That's more of an internal, how we make sure that that happens. I think the words are already there that say that the owner has to live on site
And
and they're
he's also
signing a
signing an
document
affidavit. He's also signing
is
an
correct.
affidavit to that fact.
and recording it, and then it runs with the property.
Yeah, I know, but that affidavit won't show up unless the property changes hands.
That is correct, and we will be watching.
Okay,
I mean, it's a privilege to be able to rent a guest house.
I'm just bringing up the point as to why I don't think they should have separate meters, but I will acquiesce to the commission's, I will acquiesce to the commission's.
Boy, I'm glad I read books with big words in it.
I would
Um,
opt for the option, owner's option.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, we should not, okay, so not going too far into the weeds here, but the government shouldn't be telling people things that they can't do when there's no good reason for them not to be able to do it. And here, I don't see any reason why they shouldn't have the option. Don't look at me like that.
Repeat this about the
Yeah,
government.
I understand. Like I said, we're going into the weeds a little bit.
Then you have the scenario two, if the primary house owner falls behind on the payments and the utilities get turned off. If the guest
Yeah.
house has their own meter, they can keep paying and have their own utilities still on.
Yeah, I just think the option, whether anybody chooses to do it is important. I don't think we should be restricting it unless there's an absolutely solid rock, good reason to do that. And I don't see that myself. Yes, sir.
What if the monthly bills go to a post office box? How would you know that they changed addresses?
There's still a service address on the bill. And you know what? Neighbors will talk. And the only reason that we put this requirement in there is to make sure that you, with a guest house, you stay a good neighbor to your current neighbors. If you've ever experienced absentee landlords, they're not there, they're not being impacted by the noise or the dogs or the revving engines or the parties at night or whatever it is that's disturbing the character of the neighborhood. If the owner lives there, they're less likely to think that that is okay to happen.
So this whole purpose of this thing is not because it's going to be perfect and solve every issue, but at least we have some leverage to regulate it to some degree.
Correct. And try and protect neighbors as well as allow property owners a privilege.
Yep. So is there any reason we can't leave it at the owner's discretion?
Probably the best.
Okay, so that's what we're gonna send to town council, is that the owner should have the opportunity to have separate meters should they so choose to do so.
I guess I would like to clarify too, that they don't have to separate, if they choose to have separate meters, they don't have to do all the meters. They don't have to do.
Correct.
They can choose just to do electric or just to do water and sewer or.
And they don't have to put separate lines or.
Well, if you
for
have a
the town.
meter, you'll, no matter what the meter is, you're gonna have to have a separate line for it, because there's no way to monitor it if you don't. But
But that's their choice.
Yeah,
They'd have to pay for that. expense.
yeah, that's what I mean.
yeah, they don't have to put in, like putting in an electric meter, I think would be kind of a very smart move on the person renting
Yeah.
the building out, only because of Commissioner Metter's comment. People only care what they pay for, so let's just leave it at that. I don't think that we should say, I don't think the wordage is necessary. If the owner wants to put in separate meters, he can pick and choose, but we don't need to say that. He can put in separate meters and be done with it. Unless anybody else has an issue with that. All right. CCNRs and town code conflicts. What exactly was that about?
So someone asked if someone has CCNRs and they don't allow a guest house, but the town allows a guest house, how does that work?
Well, the CCNRs, I always understand trump the zoning.
They do.
Okay. So, is-
Civilly,
pardon?
civilly.
Civilly, right. Which that's the purpose of the CCNRs anyways, is to improve the zoning.
Correct.
So is there an explanation we need to go back to town council?
No, because the attorney talked about it at the meeting.
It's, what section is that?
No, this is just comments.
The town is held accountable to enforce the ordinances that the town council adopts. The HOA is responsible for enforcing the CCNRs in their neighborhood. Property owners are responsible for receiving approval from their HOA for a guest house or subject to civil enforcement from their HOA. I mean, that's pretty
Right.
self-explanatory. So do we need to offer any comments or anything? Anybody want to make a comment? Not going there, huh?
Pretty straightforward.
Okay. Okay, so did we fulfill our obligation to our reasoning?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
I do have one issue. And it wasn't on one of those 5 points about separate driveways. It, depending on the lay of how the main house sits, requiring them to use the same driveway might put the renters having to walk through the primary residence private property yard. If it has adequate frontage to put 2 driveways and you can put a culvert in and not affect the drainage, I don't see why you should not be able to have 2 driveways.
Is there something somewhere that says you can't?
It did. It
It
does.
did.
Which where pointed out? to
Yeah,
me,
we
please.
said one
Page one.
driveway.
The one that says 152.
That's only if you're renting out your guest house. There's going to be things that maybe aren't going to be as convenient if you're renting out your guest house. But the monetary value that you get may outweigh somebody driving by your garage to get to their unit every night.
Well, it's if you've already got your landscaping in,
Why do you want to cut in another driveway?
but
Just
it's
access.
the
say-
way you have your front your front landscaping and stuff. It might require them to come in your driveway and walk across your landscaping or across your front yard to get to the other, get behind or to the side.
Way my house is laid out, if I built a guest house in the rear of my acre, I have 1 driveway. There would be no but my driveway's on the left for my primary residence. But my access to my rear of my lot is from the other side of my frontage.
Well, if you're double frontage, then you can have access on the other frontage. Most
Right.
lots don't have double frontage.
I would say Frank has
So-
some code here.
Let me bring the town engineer into this discussion because multiple entrances onto streets are usually a headache for him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm desperately looking for that section in the code, but from my memory, for driveways, we have distance requirements, minimum distances between driveways that would be affected. So it would, I believe that's 150 feet.
That's what I was thinking too.
If I'm not, I'm looking at Will and Lori because we discuss it a lot of times in our
I
reviews.
thought it
So
was 150.
if you have a lot large enough to separate the driveways by 150 feet, that might be a possibility. Otherwise, you need to share a driveway.
So that's already,
That's
In
that's a town code already,
Yeah.
so there really isn't.
but I
an
don't think we should say
opportunity.
where they can't have. In here, it specifically says they cannot have 2 driveways. If their lot allows it, I don't see why they shouldn't be allowed to have a separate
Right,
driveway.
Because a lot of people that have large garages or an RV garage behind this house, or
2
they have a
driveways.
barn, already have a second driveway to go back behind their house, so they're not putting all their horse trailer and everything in their own private driveway. It's back behind where it's neat and tidy and out of public sight. And if you have a guest house that's in the back, I don't see why you can't have a second driveway if you have adequate frontage to put one in.
So maybe we can modify the wordage for this particular item, which is item 7D on page 2.
I would just exclude it. It's already going to come up when they submit. It's going to come up under review.
Right.
When they
Driveways
submit.
are, oh, sorry.
It's going to come up under review when they submit for their plans to build the guest home.
Right. All driveways are permitted either through the building permit or through a separate driveway permit under Public Works.
So what,
Or
but
should
this
be.
says they shall use a common driveway.
Yeah, I would just exclude that comment.
Yeah, maybe we can strike that whole item D right out of there.
Yeah.
Let the town code deal with it because there's stuff already in place to do that. Through the building department and through the engineering department, am I correct?
We can do it that way.
What's your thinking?
Well, I think we need to be careful about what we're doing because we advertised the 5 things that the council said that they wanted us to look at. And we're kind of moving away from that.
Because we're not having any public comment.
I'm happy to bring forward your comments and see if they're interested in the same frame of mind on that. But I don't think that you can actually vote on that tonight.
So we won't vote on it, but we can all verbally
You can talk.
affirm the idea that item 7D needs to be removed from this particular program.
Well, I would say that the driveways should comply with the,
But they would through the building
right,
process.
that's all I'm
Yeah.
saying is driveways should comply with the requirements of the county, not the county, but the town.
Town code.
Town code.
But if
Yeah.
we strike that out of there, it automatically goes to that. Am I
Can-
correct or am I not?
No, a driveway is access to the street, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if you had, let's say if you had one wide driveway, then it could just be a couple of feet off the street and then you could branch.
On
Have a
your own
separate-
property, you can
Yeah,
drive.
so you
anywhere
could do
want.
whatever you like.
Right.
Correct.
So I don't think that's a heartburn really for a
Nope.
property owner. Okay, so we're gonna ask that thought be passed on to town council
I will do that.
per our discussion here tonight.
And this is going backwards a little bit, but Frank, as far as utilities go, that's not a problem having a single address. They can just AB it.
For multiple meters,
Yeah.
right? The utility billing, we can
Just
take care of
AB.
that because it's already allowed in code. It's rare when it happens, but
Because it's a single
is.
address, but you
It's-
don't have an issue with it. You can just
it's doable.
AB.
Now, when you do a commercial property, all the
Yeah,
meters
just
are
AB.
A, B, or
Yeah.
1 or
Mm.
2 or
Yeah.
whatever. Okay. All right, so we've had all this discussion and we have some consensus. Do we need to vote on something here? Or you're gonna pass on all of our wordage?
I will do that.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything they want to say about this while we're on this item?
So we'd have to strike B2 if we're saying if the owner has options to put separate meters.
I will go back and reword things for the council.
Okay.
Is there anything about wells, sharing a well on the?
That's up to
That's
the
another
the
issue.
county health. However they do wells.
Okay.
We don't approve wells. That's not in our purview.
That's going to go through ADWR and septics will go through the county.
That's correct.
It's already a requirement of 1 septic per acre.
Right. Wells are ADWR and septic is ADEQ
Yeah,
delegated
but
through the
it'll get
county.
reviewed for sure. In other words, if their septic
Well,
can't
not
handle a
only that,
guest
the
house,
Building
then
department will jump all over that. That's a building code thing.
Yeah.
They don't do the septics, but that's part of their permitting process.
Mhm.
You gotta have a plan before you do anything.
You correct is to get a building permit, you need a discharge authorization through either septic or sewer. Water you could haul if you had to, but you need some sort of discharge permit for sewage.
And that comes from the county.
And I
Correct.
don't know if you have anything penciled in yet, but just item F, do you have any idea how you're going to word that?
I already shut my binder because I thought you guys were done.
Well, I'm just curious what, we talked a lot, but we didn't really come up with a verbiage
For which one?
for additional requirements, item F.
Well, if you want me to talk about roof pitch, if you want me to talk about roof covering materials, if you want me to talk about color or
I
siding
think it should be
type,
very specific.
I can absolutely put that stuff in there. Because really the hardest thing to match is the roof pitch. But if we're doing site built to site built and manufactured to
Then it's
manufactured, it's
easy.
going to be a much easier
Correct.
blend.
Yeah, if we do that, I don't know that we got to go into that real far because that by just the way the thing's built, it's going to dictate a lot of it.
But they could site built to site built. If it doesn't say that it needs to match the primary,
Well,
you
it
know,
says
kind of
arch-
specifically, then they could
Architecture
build, you know, they could have it could be, then it could end up completely different. Unless you're requiring that the guest house be built in, you know, very close, or I'm not going to say exact, but I don't know what the
How
wording
about
would
we
be.
could use architecturally similar to the principal?
Yeah,
residence?
well, I don't like compatible. Like
Yeah,
similar would be
compatible
better.
means it'll go together,
Yeah.
not look the same.
Yeah,
How about must be architecturally and visually similar?
I will get rid of the word compatible and talk about matching roof pitch, style, color, and building materials.
perfect. I just know if you give people a mile, I mean, if you give them an inch, they'll take.
You're
they'll
absolutely
take
correct.
a mile.
Yeah, no, it's, yep. Which is why we're here already.
Yeah.
On this one item.
Now, if the primary residence is single story, do we have any kind of restrictions on the guest house being single story or double story?
Well, you're limited in square footage and that guest house is smaller than the primary residence.
Why would you go there? I mean, not you, but why would somebody? Okay, so if they wanted to build a 2-story home and it was visually and architecturally compatible, who really cares? I mean, that's where we start getting into their business and not our business.
Oh, you wanted me to be specific.
Yeah.
It has to match.
Good question.
It has to be within code, which only allows
Yeah.
it to build a certain size as a
Right.
second.
I know it can't be.
So
over-
if you did a 2-story, it would be a small 2-story because you're already
Yeah.
limited on your square footage.
There's a possibility.
It is a possible. Tiny homes are big.
Yeah.
So then,
Pardon the pun.
then we hit the thing about if you want to put a loft over your garage and call it a guest house.
That is totally doable.
I believe
But
this
that's a
code
building
requires
department
separation.
problem.
The guest house requires it to be a separate building.
Yeah,
This
you
isn't a
can't- if
granny
it's an
flat.
Attached garage, it's part of the house. But if it's.
It's
if
not a
s-
studio apartment. It's not a granny flat. It's not, mother-in-law quarters
So
or
this,
And does this address at all converting garages to rentals?
this does not address that. This is expecting that you will be adding a new building.
Do we have any kind of code addressing
I
garage
believe that
conversions?
the current guest house doesn't allow you to do that, that it requires a separate new building.
Yeah, that would be good to make sure that that states that, but still we don't, does the town code
UDO.
deny garage conversions into rentals? As it sits now?
Sorry, I was talking to Will and asking him to make a note so that we could check that in the morning.
Go ahead and ask.
In other words, I have a separate garage. Am I prohibited from turning that into a rental?
Do we require a 2-car garage with a house?
No,
Then you could do that.
because it's a separate building and so a building
and
is
it's
a
site
building.
built.
The date of manufacture only comes in on the manufactured home
It's
because it is a
pre-existing.
portable object.
It's pre-existing.
Remodeling a site-built structure to have a living space in it is, as far as I know, is totally doable.
Yep.
Okay, I think
Right,
we've pretty
detached.
well hammered on this. We'll let the town council headache it over for a while. Anybody have any other comment? All right, then we're gonna move on to item F, information items.
All right. So prior council action on prior P and Z cases, last session on July 12th, there wasn't anything that had gone before the commission before. We did have, with the exception of the guest house that we just talked through, we did have a couple other items going through there that did not come through the commission, but the most notable one was the contract for Matrix design for our general plan rewrite. It was approved by council, and I believe we have our first internal kickoff meeting next 15th. So
Yay.
we're moving. That is all for that item for staff.
Are you gonna talk
So
about
when do
the
they
work
start
session?
working on that?
15.
On the 15th is our
15th?
first meeting with
Okay.
them.
Yes.
And then they have a 12-month calendar. And once we know what's going on, we'll roll that out to everybody else.
Okay.
There was a study session on the 12th that Matrix did give a presentation to council on that. Staff did also bring before a creation of the building advisory board, which we'll be doing. Code is called for it. We've never had a case go that far, but we recognize that we'd rather be proactive rather than reactive. Create that now before we have a case that we should have already had that created.
Well, also the board will act as the new code reviewers.
Correct.
For the building code?
Yeah, every 6 years we review and adopt new building codes, even though the building codes come out every 3 years.
Right.
We adopt every 6 years. This would be the group that would review and make recommendations to council.
I sit on that board for the county.
Awesome.
That's a very
Helpful.
interesting position.
And then finally, we have, it's a town code amendment regarding camping inside parking lots within town of Chino Valley. We've partnered with the PD on this. We recognize that there is an issue within the town, and we are working actively to correct that with code amendments that the police can enforce rather strongly.
That does not go through the planning commission.
Yes, correct.
It's in the town code. It's not in the UDO.
What about the subdivision text amendment? Anything there?
So that'll be coming. So we've got the other item with recreational vehicle park and then the subdivision text amendment. We've got handouts to talk through you here next.
So for the recreational vehicle parks. Thanks. Let me keep my sheet. Will is handing out a sheet that has about 7 things in it with some sub items.
Thank you.
There's a lot of pieces about an RV park district that isn't really anything you guys need to worry about. Like the width of the road will be 24 street with 24 feet within the park. It will be built to standards based on what Frank has in his code. It'll have two access points if it's over a certain number of units. So there's that kind of stuff that you guys don't need to worry about that. But really what we need to look at are these items that are on this list. So if we're having a separate district for RV park, if someone wants to come in and build an RV park, they need to come in and rezone their property. And so that means every RV park will come in to this group and to council because it's a rezone.
Whatever we pick out of this list is what they're going to be required to meet.
Yes,
And we're going to do this tonight.
yes. Or if you need to chew on it, we can bring it back to another meeting. This one, it looks simple, but it is kind of complicated. I've spent a number of days digging through things to try and make sense of stuff because there's a lot of overlapping things that happen and trying to find RV parks for a comparison for a site plan that has the statistics that I can share with you was challenging. So unfortunately, we have 2 site plans that you have already seen from an RV park that was withdrawn. And we have one from, I think, the county fairgrounds, and they're different densities. And so I looked at densities like X units per acre, and then I looked at X square feet per unit. There's also a space size that is different than the amount of space in terms of open space for each unit. It starts getting kind of a little bit complicated. So the first thing that I looked at was a minimum park size. Many of the jurisdictions have very different sizes. There was not one size that was like, yeah, everything's 5 acres. No. We went from 7,500 square feet up to 10 acres as minimums. And so that's kind of your range. Can't imagine that you would want to have an RV park on 7,500 square feet.
At your, at our study session, you had a handout that had, yeah, that was awesome.
I still have it, and I've added another 2 rows.
Yeah, I would like to be able to maybe hash this out and really use, that actually had parks in it and what other parks we're using, and got very detailed, which I think this zoning needs to be very detailed
Yes.
in what we're going to require. That way, when the developer comes in, they know exactly what
Yeah.
they are required to meet to put a park in. Chino,
So
did you, anybody remember that sheet from the study
yeah, I
session?
remember the sheet, but
We're
It
going to
was
go
very-
make copies.
It was very good. I know I made notes on mine. I didn't know,
Right? Well, I've highlighted mine, so you can ignore my highlights because I was going, well, this one from here and this one from there. So as Will is going to get that, the first thing we need to think about is what size, what park size. And I had talked to Will about, well, what if we mapped all the 2 acres in town and all the 5-acre parcels in town and all the 10-acre parcels? But when we started talking about it and trying to do it, it doesn't really help us understand what size is really appropriate. Because anybody that has a larger lot than whatever our minimum is could take their lot and split it down.
shouldn't it be done more by an area as opposed to just
Yeah.
lot size?
Yeah.
Well, that's gonna fall under the new general.
plus I
plan.
would like to see the general plan hashed out too before this even gets, where are we can even allow RV parks?
When you say district, is there a specific area?
No,
Like-
this is a zoning district that we're creating. What we were trying to do, and I know that it would be best to wait. Currently, there's no way that we could stop anyone else from coming in and doing the same thing that we just went through.
So let me offer a suggestion.
Except that-
This seems like a lot of stuff to
Yeah,
decide
it's
tonight.
not gonna go through.
Yeah.
Is there not some way that somebody, town council or whoever can put a moratorium on RV parks until after the general plan is done?
No, state law is really specific about what a moratorium is for, and this does not qualify. Used to,
And
until they
there's,
changed the law.
and there's a real difference between an RV park and a mobile home park?
Yes, manufactured home park versus RV park. A
'Cause I've s-
manufactured
I've
home,
seen some RV lots that were bigger than some of the trailer park lots.
manufactured home park, your unit is set. It's not, you're not going to get in it and drive it to the next place.
Yeah, but for size wise.
Right. So I went online and did some searching because I don't own an RV. I was telling Will, I grew up with airplanes. My dad was a pilot. I understand airplanes. I understand all about airspace and stuff. If this was about airplanes, I could have coughed this out pretty easily. It's RVs and I don't do RVs. So I had to do a bunch of research to figure out what even sizes are there and how long can you go and can you haul other things and what does that look like? And once you have a unit, first of all, what's the average width? And then how many pop outs can you get? And how big are those pop outs? And can you get them on both sides? And you have to have support underneath them. So how big does the pad have to be for this? So This is what you have as a minimum space width is 35 to 40, minimum length is 50 to 65, and every state has its own different minimums and maximums for RVs, which I didn't know. Frank knew because he hauls RVs. But what's legal in Arizona might not be legal in Colorado in terms of length or width or height. I just found that incredibly fascinating that every state has different criteria. So I picked the largest because that's the way it works. If you don't pick the largest, that's who's going to come into your park, and then you're not going to be able to fit people. So 35 to 40 feet for a width for a space, 50 feet to 65 feet. And so if you have a 40 by 65 space, that's 2,600 square feet, which is a little bigger than the one in Yuma, which is 2,400 square feet, but that was also written before we have our current RVs, which have gotten a little bit larger. And so I've got that in place. And just because you have that space doesn't mean, oh, it's that divided into an acre and that gives you your density. That is not how that works. It's not how that works at all. So in an RV park, about 25% of the property is roadway. So on number 2, what I did was I took our acre, which is 43,560, and I took out 25%, which gives us 32,670 square feet. So that's for the RV space, the open space, the landscaping, and any park amenities. So then you divide the 4.5 dwelling units per acre. So I picked 4.5, 6, 7, and 8, and divided that into the 32,670 to come up with how many square feet per unit have to be within the boundaries of the RV park. So each space is going to be smaller, but there's going to be overall extra space per unit that will be landscaping, walkways, bocce ball, whatever exterior amenities are going to be there, the manager's office, all that kind of stuff. So it works a little bit differently than like a single family subdivision where you own your lot and everything you have is in your space. So that's how I figured out dwelling units per acre and square feet per unit. So you take out the roads first, and then you get the actual amount of usable square feet per unit. And you take the 2,600, which is the pad, and you subtract that. And then on number 6, that's how much usable open space per unit based on the dwelling unit density. I know, I'm sorry. So each one of the densities has a different amount of open space per unit. So of course, the more dwelling units, the more units you get in there, the less open space you get per unit. So that's that balance that has to happen.
So is there a unit there? When you do something like this, you have to have enough units to make it pay.
Correct. And I do
So
not know
is
what
it-
that number is.
Okay, because there's probably some sort of industry standard that says if
Mhm.
you're below 6
Right.
units an acre, then you're done.
And they're not going to tell me that.
Because we could be setting something here where nobody could be successful in the RV business.
We could, but this is up for amendment, and it could be just a stopgap for us until we get the general plan in place. So then on number 7, there are things that other jurisdictions required or allowed. And so I listed them. Visitor parking. Some places required it. Some places allowed it. Some places, if they had a facility where they brought in outside entertainment, which would draw from the community, they needed to put in extra visitor parking because it wasn't just folks at the park. So is that something that we want? I've experienced both. So if they are going to have outside entertainment in, then they need to have the ability to park for you and me who aren't living in the RV park that want to come and watch the Oak Ridge Boys or, whoever it is.
So you just said something right there.
Yeah.
living in the RV park, which seems to be a total fear of everybody around here.
I misspoke.
Pardon?
Who is currently, I'm living
Staying.
temporarily, staying, thank
Staying.
you, in the RV park.
So
Hmm.
if you're having entertainment, that suggests that you're gonna be there long enough to want to watch something besides drive on to the next place the next day, which was always my
It
part of
could,
an RV park. But
could
in
also be
southern
the
Arizona
draw.
In the wintertime, they live there until the winter's over.
well, and I've seen them actually use that as a draw on certain weekends to fill up their park.
So
Like
then
a
it becomes an
weekly-
Event center,
Like
an
a
event
weekly.
Yeah.
location.
We can say you can't do that.
Well, that's, yeah, this is. a
I'm looking
mess.
at those RV parks down, Route 70 that, wagon wheel or whatever they call them near Salome, that area there.
Quartzsite.
Courts, no, yeah, even
Court
before you get to
also.
Quartzsite, yeah. So they have all kinds of things there.
Yeah, and that's a winter visitor
It's a winter.
haven,
Yeah,
We don't
snowbird
want
thing.
that.
correct.
We don't want it to look like Quartzsite.
No.
So I've listed a manager's office, centralized recreation, a community center, outdoor recreation facilities, and a couple of them have actually had a convenience store, like light
Well,
retail.
that makes
for
sense. That would make
folks.
total sense
Yeah.
right there.
Like a laundry and
Yeah.
some soap and.
Yeah, and RV parts or whatever, or sodas and
Yep.
food
Shower.
ings.
Laundry, I'm gonna
Shower
itemize
laundry.
laundry in there. So the one thing I don't have an answer from our attorney is, does state law allow us to restrict the number of days someone can stay in an RV park? And I don't have that answer yet.
I'm not going to speculate, but I would sure think so, but.
I mean, we dug through the ARSs today. There's, it's ARS 500 I think it's 9, but then it refers to 6 other sections of the ARS that are in whole different chapters. And you have to pull them out and compare them and understand what that piece is. It gets super complicated. And I don't think we got an answer from reading that. So unfortunately, we need to have the attorneys help us understand.
And that would have settled a lot in our last
It could have.
issue, because that was big, everybody's thing, is he was saying that he would extend their stay.
Right, I remember that was a big discussion. And so that is an item that we have in for the attorneys to help us and give us some guidance on that.
Some of these RV parks are like resorts.
Yes,
Seasonal resort.
yes,
type
they
thing.
are.
And I think that's the idea for Chino, to make it
Yeah.
a destination resort, not a
Fly,
mobile home park.
Overnight
Needs
type
to be an
thing.
RV recreational park.
Yeah.
Where people come stay for a while and they leave. And that's going to benefit the town, plus it's going to benefit vendors and Camp Compass Training and the Equestrian Center and ATVing and all that stuff. If it's
Paintball
a
thing.
place that
Mhm.
does have pretty high turnover, so more people have a chance to come stay there rather than permanent spaces clogging the place up. Needs to have a turnover rate.
Now, we have plans, or we had originally had plans with Old Home Manor to have a certain area there developed for RV parks.
That's still moving ahead.
Yeah, is that still moving? Yeah. Okay.
Chair, I do believe Frank Marbury has a comment.
And that would be another item in here. As far as zoning goes, I think it would be very prudent to require the zoning that it has to be in a location that has to hook up to town water and sewer. Otherwise, it's not going to happen in that area. We don't want wells going in and septics going
That's
in
right.
for an RV park.
Yeah, it's pretty limiting.
It is, but
Mhm.
RV park, that's going to be better for the town and better for our water and better for everybody. And that kind of pushes it towards Old Home Manor.
Frank?
Oh.
Frank, go ahead and talk.
Mr. Chair, if I, just one comment, if it hadn't already if it's already been discussed, I apologize. But on number 7, would you want to add provisions for bathhouse or restroom facility on
Well, I
site?
think, yeah, I think that would, under item
Community
8, that
center.
would be some of the other items I'd like to see as a laundry facility, a shower facility,
Stay
restrooms.
away. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's absolutely.
That would
Hadn't
be,
got
that would be a
far yet.
question. Then if you have RVs, you have those facilities, so you're going to allow tent camping?
Yeah, you wouldn't have to.
That would have to be
Yeah.
specified if you're going to allow
Not
that.
all RVs
I
have a
don't know
laundry.
why not.
And not all of them will have laundry, correct, but I'm talking showers and bathrooms.
I'm just taking your ideas
Yeah.
down.
Mhm. Community center, yeah, kind of that.
So we're going to have to pick concentration.
I mean, that would be another way you were saying about a moratorium, that if you specify this stuff now, that's going to kind of force them into those areas where we want them.
Okay. And I'm not disagreeing with that. So maybe we work on item 3, maximum density. If you put 8 units an acre, that kind of sounds like a lot. But the developer would love that because then he's making money.
Right.
So
and
we
I-
need to hit a happy compromise in my mind,
Do we know what,
6 or 7.
just for instance, not in Chino, but Orchard Ranch and out at the track, and what their density is in the county, parks in the county,
So we have the.
some of the nicer parks?
The one from the county fair, I believe. And I believe that
They're
one.
pretty packed in there.
Yeah,
It's not
looks
that one.
crowded when you
Yeah.
go by.
Yeah, it
That would
does.
be not something I would.
No.
We apparently have
But that
not
would give
paid
us
for
an
the
idea,
privilege to
visually.
rotate pages.
what we're-
Right. I don't know what. I mean.
Can you go to number 2?
who knows?
Yeah.
I've stayed in both, me as an RVer, where they're packed in there and it's not very nice. And then I've stayed at real nice ones, but
Right.
to make it affordable for the developer of those spaces,
not
it's
doing it.
cost
Spaces
you
are
some money.
expensive. You're paying for your privilege.
Okay, so
Yes, sir.
let's go to the third one.
And it's dramatic. You can stay in
Yeah, so this is the one that's at the
national
fairgrounds.
parks, $15-17, $35 for hookups, and you can go to private parks that are resorts and they're $120, $160 a night.
Hey, you might as well rent a hotel room. For that
Yeah.
kind of money.
I mean, they've got tons of amenities to go along with that, but
So the one that we had seen here was not this dense. This is 7.2 dwelling units per acre, and I believe the ones that we saw were in the 5s.
I think the final rendition that was proposed was 4.5 units per acre.
So this
would
is-
be like a
It would be
fairgrounds.
one of those that
Yeah.
is
do you know
scanned.
what the density is at the fairground?
It's close to 7.
It
There's
is.
two phases. One's a little lower and then one's a little higher.
I'd opt more down to the 4.5.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go take the very first one. And you've seen this one before. Or maybe not.
Yeah.
I think it was withdrawn before.
It's also going to force them to build a larger park.
That's right.
So even though this looks exactly the same intensity as the others, the angles of these parking spaces are different. And so you have a whole lot more space on the front and the back end of this.
Right, you've got triangles that you're working
Yes.
with
Yeah.
there. All right, 4.5, my vote. Now we're making headway.
And it gives you more green space for them to
Correct.
do a pool or
Yeah.
playground and picnic
Let's
area.
go back up to item 1. I picked 10 acres. Anybody? pick
Yeah, I
that?
would think 10
10,
acres.
yeah.
Yeah.
10?
10.
Minimum.
Okay. This is like taking a test and cheating. Okay, item
You
6.
get to write the answers.
Item 6, because we picked 4.5, we should just stay with that.
Well, whether you
Well,
pick
no,
it or
that-
not, that's what you have. That's
Yeah.
the result of picking 4.5.
Right. Yeah, but you gave us choices, so.
I did, but once you pick the one up above,
you-
then
Once you pick
it
the
generates the
density,
open space for you.
Well, then you shouldn't have put all them bloody choices.
it
Okay, so item 7. Visitor parking, that's a good one. None of them,
Well, requiring visiting parking, those people that have an RV and want to tow a car behind would have a place to put the car and
Well,
visitor parking.
I would look at visitor as separate. In other words, if each each RV spot should actually have provision for at least one vehicle.
Correct. And that's one of the things that I was going to put in there anyways.
Yeah, and then visitor parking, I would say allowed, that I
Separate.
wouldn't require, but
yeah,
allowed
you
to
can
have
allow it
visitor-
because nobody's requiring it on this
Yeah, I
chart.
would say it's allowed, but that might be at the office where there's,
Check in and
check in and some extra spots, because if you
check.
have
in.
relatives staying there and you want to
Yeah.
go visit them, where are you going to park?
Or if you have an event. You would
Well, the
have,
event parking would be probably
Separate.
set by the
Yeah.
building codes.
okay,
Or actually the zoning code would set the parking because you build an office building, the zoning code sets the parking spaces.
That can be nebulous. I've had people argue it's an RV park and you've already set my standard, which is one parking space per one RV space.
Oh.
And you can't ask for more. And so if we're going to allow community gatherings, then we need to be able to calculate that at a separate.
Yes, just because you rented a space to
Yes.
park your trailer doesn't mean you got a guaranteed parking spot for an event.
Yes.
yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
But visitor parking probably should be required.
I'm sorry.
Visitor parking probably should be required, because
Do
where
we
are
have to
visitors
give a
going to park?
percentage?
Yeah, I don't.
Because if you require have one for every space, that's a lot of
It'll
room.
be more like
Yeah.
1 per 8 spaces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like
Okay,
that.
so
Just some required. In other words, it's where they can't have zero.
required at a percentage. Okay. Manager office required,
Required.
yeah.
centralized recreation area.
I'd say
And
required.
also in the manager's office, that's a 24-hour year round. Not that it has to be open, but that somebody's
be
there,
occupied.
has to be managed.
Correct.
Manager has to be
24.
on site.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
Well, actually 24 hours.
well, that would be, I mean, yeah.
They would
Yeah,
live
when
there.
Somebody's staying there
Yeah.
24 hours, somebody.
If
has to
there's
be in the
somebody using your
office.
business, you got to be there
Right.
24 hours.
Yeah.
So that would be,
Power
as long as the
comes
thing
down
is
or
in
the
operation,
septic backs
meaning
up,
somebody's staying there, then the manager has to be there.
Somebody's dog's running loose.
Mhm.
Centralized recreation area, what are we thinking
I
there?
would say required also.
Yeah, I
You
would
need to
say.
have some kind of,
Picnic.
That includes a
Area.
pool and things like that.
Correct.
We're going to require a pool?
no, I
No,
wouldn't require a
not
pool. but-
required
Just an
one, but
area.
that would include it if we're going to.
Could be a barbecue pit. It
Yeah.
could be tennis, could be bocce ball. could be-
Playground. for
Pickleball.
kids.
Pickleball.
Same thing as the outdoor recreation area.
Doggy potty area.
Okay, so community center,
I would actually discourage pools in Chino.
Yeah, in Chino,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it should be a
The community center is an indoor gathering place. So that could be
For
your
movies.
potlucks or playing cards
Yeah.
or book.
so we're talking like a clubhouse type
Yes.
thing.
Clubhouse,
So are
yeah.
we requiring that? For an RV
No.
park? No.
No,
Uh,
I would just
allowed. I would-
allow
I would
it.
allow it.
Yeah.
Then you would be looking at people staying there for 6
Right, we
months.
don't
That's
want them
right.
to stay that long.
No,
Okay, outdoor recreation facilities,
Could be like a walking trail.
Playground.
oh, I see. So it's different from the central.
Yeah,
It's kind of the
it's-
same thing, but
Well, one of them is more like of a team thing and the other is more solo, in my opinion.
well, you're gonna require both? It
I-
seems
I-
a little egregious to me.
Require a pool.
I-
well, you might just want to put open area or
Could, yeah.
If we're looking at if we're looking at the fact that we're not expecting them to stay that long, I would say we look for an outdoor recreation facility, but not a centralized recreational area.
That would cover both.
Right.
By centralizing it, that's maybe, yeah, I get that. So we'll change that to allowed and not required.
And then requiring outdoor recreation facilities.
Yeah.
Yep. Convenience thing, I don't know if we should require it. I mean, a good businessman would do that, so we should do it allowed.
Yeah.
Allowed.
Yeah,
Allowed.
because somebody just may not want to deal with selling soda pop to people, but that's a great opportunity right there. Okay, other items.
Well, someone mentioned laundry and then I heard bathhouse / restroom /
Yep.
shower.
Allowed.
Or required.
The
Allowed.
Laundry
I
should
would
be
just
allowed.
allow
They
it.
should all should be allowed.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Laundry allowed. Shower facilities.
Somebody said that? Bring it up.
I was also brought up tent camping on site if we're going to be doing an event center.
So if
for-
you do that, then you got to have spaces for it, unless you are willing to subtract
Mm.
an RV space for a tent space.
But I would say just allowed, not required. that they-
Right.
Why not prohibit it?
Well, because some, actually surprisingly,
People travel and they
people
just want to set
do
up a
tent
camp for the
camp a
night.
lot.
Yeah, small car just has a little, one of those little things that pop open.
So
and-
if they allow it, they have to have a spot for it.
That is absolutely
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
Would also like to see the 2 access points required.
I didn't put it on there, but that's part of
Mhm.
what I would have been adding in
And
there.
underground utilities, of
Would a
course.
tent space be different than the set aside for from the actual RVs, or would it be in the same?
They would
area?
have to use an RV space
Okay.
because they'll get X spaces. You can't cram any other people in there that don't fit in a space.
Okay.
So as the town engineer, it's part of the requirements that they would have underground utilities anyways, is it not?
Not necessarily. I think we should say, if we want underground utilities, we need to say
Yeah,
that.
I would like that required, along with mandatory drought tolerant landscaping and.
That's
I
a
would-
standard for
yeah.
us in our
Yeah.
department.
And since it's an RV park, I'd really like to see mandatory 6-foot masonry perimeter wall.
So the piece that you don't see is 20 feet of landscaping with a block wall around the perimeter of the
Required.
project.
Like to see that required.
That is not on this list, but it's on the list of things that I was going to require in the code.
Okay, perfect.
What about hookups? I mean, for sewage and water, is there a specific code or anything for that?
That would be done by the civil engineer that did the
Mhm.
project, yes?
Right, as far as if you require full hookups, I guess that would be
Mm.
up to this board as far as requiring or not full hookups, but as far as the actual technical installation, that's more of a engineer question of how to
Would
do
you-
it.
Why would you not have full hookups other than cost?
I think
Yes,
that
so-
should be a choice of they should be able to have a mixture,
Dry camp.
full hookups. Some people just like to dry camp and I can offer that exact same size space for a lot less money.
So let's just say underground utilities and let them decide what
Mhm.
the hookups are.
Right,
Mhm.
We
just
don't
from-
even have to specify that, I don't
No,
think.
we're good.
Right, Mr. Chair, just from personal experience, I've stayed in some places that just had a centralized dump station, for
Yeah.
example. So that's another thing. Do you require some sort of dump station on
station.
site or not? Some places haven't even had that I've stayed at, so.
Okay, so that brings it back to,
Sewer.
you could, okay, so your point, if it has to be hooked up to town water and sewer to limit the areas where it can go, then they do have to have something there.
Well, if they got full hookups, they're gonna have that, but he's saying about a separate dump station for if people aren't
Don't
getting
want the
full hookups, they have a place to dump.
But
I
that
think
would
should
be
just
an
be
option.
allowed, yeah.
Yeah, that should be something that the owner should decide. Did we pass the test?
I think you did.
Are we requiring paved roads?
Yes.
You would have,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be a town. I think that's
Yes.
a town code. Am I
24
correct?
foot wide paved roads.
Right, all drive aisles and drive lanes and dumpster lanes to get to dumpster locations, everything like that will be required to be paved per our current code. The spaces themselves,
Concrete.
it's an option.
No, it's not an option.
Oh, then we need to put it in here.
That's
so,
what it is.
okay.
You're gonna put that in.
Yes.
And then maybe a requirement that all lighting has to be
Downlighting.
down lighting.
That's a county dark sky ordinance
That's-
thing.
It has to be public water and sewer.
Pardon?
It has to be public water and sewer.
According to Commissioner
I would
Switzer's
sure like to see that now.
requirements.
It should be.
He's a bully, but that's okay. After we've done all this, these are suggestions from us. You're gonna come back to us with a deal.
Yes, I am.
Okay, because I don't want to drive a stake in the ground here.
Now, what about things like horse riding or anything like that, recreational stuff? Are you
That
going
would
to
be totally up to the owner.
set up to the owner?
Yeah.
You're going to allow it or not allow it?
I mean,
know how
hopefully
you-
they're close enough to other facilities
Yeah.
that they use other facilities in the
Yeah.
community.
Or we kind of want to get them out towards open space. So all those things are available.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you get
Okay.
good notes?
I have,
We have to turn our paper in, teacher?
if you want to hand it in, that's great. I have notes and I'm going to be re-listening to our meeting.
Do we have more input? Because this is important.
Thank you.
Are you happy? I mean, if
I
we need to get more stuff for you, we can keep beating on this.
We have
Yeah,
another
we've got
item
the
we have to
subject.
cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Oh.
that's
For
it.
it. All right. I'll go pass it up.
Okay.
I got one for her right here. I got an extra one. Oh, there's two pages. Oh my God.
Both sides.
Two holes. What are you trying to do? Kill us here?
Are we getting paid overtime for this?
You want to just go through each item with us one at a time? Or do you want to do it some other way?
I think we'll go through each one and really this is Will's item, but as he's getting up here, I will share with you that these
Whoa.
text amendments are a result of the Title 50 and 51 that Frank had already worked on
Right.
and the council had approved. So there was inconsistencies between what Frank had done with his utilities and what we had in the subdivision code. That along with the case that we had where the tract became a lot. We've
Right.
added some definitions to take care of that. So let Will take over.
Yeah, so thank you, Lori. So like as she said, this is a result of us trying to become in compliance with our town code. This just covers the 50-51 amendments. I know we've talked about several other amendments to the subdivision regulations. It's not going to be all encompassed in here. It would be massive if we try to grab everything together at one time. I don't know, Chair, if you would like to just go through item by item.
We agreed on that when you
Yeah,
were
let's
having.
just-
Oh, I apologize for
So I
that.
think
Okay.
that'll be, I think it's just best to go down the list. And work it
Sure.
out.
Okay, so starting with chapter 2.1 meetings of words and terms. Let me back up just a little bit on here. You have the original language that is currently in code, which is set as black. Deletions are red with a line through it, and then additions are blue.
Just a suggestion. I don't know if you need to read the whole thing.
Sure.
Just maybe hit the
Hit the
highlights.
The
and-
highlights, we can do that.
Yeah.
So 2.1 lot, parcel, plot, or premise being used as interchangeable. We're getting rid of that. You just want me to go until we've got
No,
questions?
unless somebody says, hey, wait a minute, let's
Cool.
just keep going.
Flag lot, we're getting rid of this as depicted in the diagram below. I look back through several years of code. We've never had a diagram, so we're just gonna get rid of that. And then we are going to add that flag lots cannot be utilized in the new zoning districts of less than 1 acre. So that SF 12,000 and SF 24,000, you won't be able to utilize a flag lot in there. Right-of-way dedications. So chapter 4.23 is a little funky. We have had this provision in our code since the late 80s, early 90s. It is essentially if you have dedicated right-of-way to the town of Chino Valley to use as our street system, that dedication will not count against you as your net acreage if you choose to split your property. So say you've got 2 acres, you dedicate 1/3 of an acre. If you come in to split, you have the required zoning. You still, in the eyes with this code, have 2 acres and you can split effectively. We are
the right of way doesn't take away your acreage.
correct.
Okay.
So that's still going to hold true. However, we are going to add the provision that this is not applicable to the SF 12, SF 24,000. You get too small when you start doing that. Water
Yep.
sewer doesn't work, or sorry, well and septic doesn't work. You get into some weird situations. 5, we're going to add a definition section to the subdivisions, definition of subdivision, tract, lot, roads, and parcels. 4.23, apologize if the title did not carry over. I thought I'd fix that. We are going to remove the 1-year timeline or time limit on that and change that to a 3-year. Before it was a 1 year with a 1-year extension. 3 years outright, it's a lot easier. That gives everybody enough time to get through the technical review portion. And we're running into that, a lot of that issues now with the
Yeah,
workload.
time is really tough right now.
Exactly.
That's a good one.
For the final plat review, code currently called out that final plats were only to be reviewed by town council. Even though we've been bringing that back through before the commission, so we're just solidifying that one here. And then in addition to this, we are adding a time limit on final plats. We've had a couple where they don't end up being recorded because we're waiting on a bond or assured water supply. We're going to set a hard limit of 1 year after council approval. If it's not recorded, you come back. This coincides with the 5051 amendments for Frank. Their technical review documents, all the engineering, civil engineering documents are good for 1 year. So that's just to bring that into conformance. Land splits and other divisions of land not requiring a subdivision. So all lot splits. We are leaving everything the same, except adding the prohibiting lot splits for zoning districts with the 12,000 and 24,000. Again, it's a density, it's a water sewer issue. There's a lot more requirements once you start getting that dense. So we're saying you have to go subdivision. Minor subdivision, it kind of tags onto this land split thing. The minor subdivision offers certain reliefs such as a lessened or waived at the discretion of public works director, things like traffic study or drainage study. Staff, we're going to leave that still the same thing here, except we're going to prohibit it again with the SF 12, SF 24,000, essentially saying that you have to go through a full major subdivision if you're developing at that density. 5.3.3 water facility and design. This one is heavily with the 5051 amendment. We had a lot of blending of responsibilities of the zoning administrator and the public works director as it pertains to water. I believe it actually gave some more leeway to the zoning administrator than the public works director as control on who hooks up and what hookups look like. We're getting rid of that. We are going to, the only thing that we are leaving in here is an exemption that came about whenever we rewrote the subdivision regulations back in 2020. There is an exemption in there that council included that says up until September 1, 2025, if you split a piece of property that is within the required hookup area, and I'm talking split as in land splits, not subdivision or minor subdivision, you're exempt from hookup. So that is something that council direction that was added. We are intending to keep that in there. And then we're going to conclude this section to see Town Code Title 5 for all of the regulations. Title 5 encompasses 5051. Staff didn't, we wanted to make sure that we can cover everything underneath there. So we didn't have.
We
to come
didn't
back.
just have to duplicate it here. Got it.
Exactly it. And then 5.3.3, same exact thing, except for sewer. There's an exemption in there. If you're within, the certain requirement, you do not have to hook up if you split your property by September 1, 2025. And then same, see Title 5 for all other regulations.
It's
Yeah.
pretty straightforward.
All right.
Is there any questions with this? It seems very straightforward.
Okay. So based on that, staff at the next planning and zoning meeting, we'll bring this forward as a standard text amendment for a public hearing. And we'll get a vote, take it to council.
Anything we want to add, take away, or mess with? Okay, thank you, Will.
Yeah.
Then we have the next item.
Oh, I do have one question.
Yes.
So if it's a minor land split, you're not requiring all the sidewalks and gutters and all that.
So that gets multifaceted. So a minor subdivision,
Just a land.
a land split, no. That would not be a requirement. It's a separate process.
Any other questions? Thank you, Will. And we have item F3, the public. Are we asking the public to come and speak up about anything that they want to?
It's like open mic.
I'm going to open it up for public comment for 3 minutes. Does anybody like to speak? But it has to be something the zoning department or the zoning commission has jurisdiction over. Sir, would you like to come up? I think so.
My name's John Garden, and the only thing that concerned me was we were talking about RV parks and time of stay. And as far as I know, I camp a lot. And for decades now, most of the states in the United States have had restrictions on how long you can stay in a campground, national parks, and most of our camping across the country now has been let go by the federal government. So now most of it's managed by private companies, and they still have restrictions on how long you can stay there, because I grew up in a time period where back in the 60s, where people were using campgrounds for places to live and stay. I mean, there were times when I was camping when I was a kid and a young adult during the Vietnam era, because I'm a Vietnam brat myself. And, times were hard and people were living in campgrounds. So I think that's when they started that, having restrictions on time so they could rotate people in and out. Where most places, I think now across the country, maybe 2-3 weeks. I mean, you can leave and go somewhere else and then come back within 30 days. So that was my only concern as far as like an RV park or something like that, because I know that's been a big concern of a lot of people, of restrictions on how long you can stay there. Because I mean, an RV park is so they can come and check out our area and see how things are going. But we'd like to see them move on, 2, 3, 4 weeks down the road and not be staying there like, well, we call them snowbirds. I'm not one, but somebody mentioned, I think it was Quartzsite. That's how Quartzsite started back in the 50s and 60s. And look at Quartzsite now. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I think Lori Lineberry addressed that they're working with the legal department to set parameters for that, just for your information. Thank you for coming up. Anybody else? All right, we're going to close this public portion of the meeting and bring up a motion to adjourn.
One last request.
I already asked for a motion. You're too late.
I was just curious if, Lori, there was any progress on, you were in the study section, you were talking about giving the planning and zoning more teeth, I guess you could put it, as to where if a rezone comes before the commission and the commission votes no on that it would not go to council.
The rezone has to go, even though you're still a recommending body.
Right.
Correct. I know right now it's a recommendation, but Most
State
planning and
law
zonings.
requires rezones to go to
council?
council. The thing that we were talking about in our work session was preliminary plats,
Oh,
the possibility of having it stop at planning commission. And I have not had that discussion with council yet.
very good. Answers my question.
Anything else? Did you get satisfied with that? or-
Absolutely.
Okay. Make sure,
Motion
that's a
to
lot
adjourn.
that's a lot of authority for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is that typical in other places?
That's
It
very
is.
typical of other
So
places to have the,
the preliminary plat
Yes.
can be refused. We haven't done
well,
that
the
here.
idea is that you're not necessarily refusing it, but you're telling them things that need to be changed. They need to go back and change those things to where it satisfies, you know. the
We have done
design.
that, but it was a recommendation that they do that. But now you're looking to give us the authority to just say you got to come back.
I'm looking at talking to council and seeing if they're willing to do that.
All right.
Motion
Anything
to
else?
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn
I'll
second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you. Thank you, sir, for coming up and speaking.